Heritage Action. And she's a community organizer in the best way. We need more community organizers like her rather than someone else we can put under that category. So she now is involved in Heritage Action, and she's going to give us a presentation on spending, taxes, and what possible solutions are to those problems. And we just happened to land this on April 15th, which I think was very appropriate. And it just worked out that way. Of course, I had to shift my speakers around, but it was worked out very well. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen, and then she has a presentation, have a Q&A. I'll let you control when to end, because I know you have somewhere else to go. And we are going to video her presentation, and we put that up on our YouTube channel. Karen.
Well, thank you very much. Very glad to be here. Apologize for being a little bit late. It was pouring down cats and dogs when I'm loading up my car, and it just unraveled a whole scenario of misfortunes. But I made it here, and we're doing well. My name is Karen Jaroch, and Heritage Action is the sister organization to the Heritage Foundation. How many people have heard of the Heritage Foundation? Okay, almost all of you have. Very good. Well, the Heritage Foundation was founded about 41 years ago. We are relatively new. We've been on the scene for about 4 years. We started in 2010. And the reason we were formed is when Obamacare was being kind of the political football in Congress trying to be passed, was going to be passed, was it not. The Senate took a House bill, stripped the language of it, kind of inserted their thing, and where's the speaker? Yeah, this was, is it up there?
Up here.
Okay, I was going to say if I could, I'll try and stay back.
Turn the volume down?
The volume?
No, not on the mic, but on the amplifier.
Just hold it away from him a little bit.
Okay. Okay, is this okay?
We'll try that.
Okay. So anyhow, being a think tank, Foundation could not do anything to stop it, so they decided to create Heritage Action, which is a C4, meaning that we can do political advocacy and lobbying, except we're the good lobbyists. We lobbyists for the taxpayer, not for any special interest. So my background, I have an engineering degree. I worked in industry with Northrop Grumman, Texas Instruments, in manufacturing. When I had kids, I became a full-time mom, did the PTA thing, and thought everything was going well until I saw signs that my government was getting out of control, as I'm sure all of you have, and that's why you're here. So I kind of started to get involved and found my new passion in life was to go into politics rather than my kids were well on their way. So anyhow, that's how I got involved and while I'm here. I mentioned Obamacare. That was really the start of our organization. Here is a picture of the tax code, and you all know the Supreme Court recently said that Obamacare is a tax, right? I don't think this tax code actually even includes Obamacare, but even without it, you can see how much regulation, how complicated things have gotten and just out of control. Here are stacks of papers 4 times taller than the Speaker of the House currently is. So for all of us individuals to know what's in there, you don't, and that's how come it can be abused. They said if mousetraps were designed like the income tax code, this is what a mousetrap would look like. So definitely, I think that's true. But I hear they've simplified the tax form. Recently, it says Part 1, Box 1, how much money did you make last year? You put it in a box, and it says, send it in. That's pretty much where we're going. Oh, no, by the way, if you have any questions or comments, there's a little box there provided for your comments. So, anyhow, we're poking fun at that. But really, what we're dealing with is a spending problem. We are burying ourselves, and sometimes we wonder how come our economy isn't taking off. Well, just like this donkey here, when you start adding debt and regulations and taxation, this is a kind kind of a symbolism of what our economy is going through right now. And we just keep adding, instead of taking those bags off, we've been adding and piling onto it. In fact, if you look at our, this is actually a really scary graph. And by the way, I have a lot of these graphs in a booklet over on the table, so I hope afterwards you want to go ahead and if you haven't gotten one already. Okay, so what does this show? This blue line here is revenue. This is how much taxes that are coming in. Unfortunately, the red line is the spending line. And you can see, it's above what you're taking in. So we're spending more than we're taking in. On average, this blue line here, over time, the last 50 years, we've averaged about 18% of our GDP is what we spend each year. And on average, since 1952, we've spent at 20%. Well, look what we're doing to ourselves. This is the year 2013, and you can see we're well above the 20% normal, but then we're going to really spike up there in the end. And the difference between these two here, that's a deficit. So every year we're spending, deficit spending. It's just unsustainable. We can't go on like that, so we need to make some changes. And this chart really, to me, demonstrates what our problem is. If we keep going, this is what we're going to look like. We may already be there, unfortunately. Again, the national debt, all those deficits year after year pile onto our debt. And there is a looming problem that one of these days we're going to have to address. If we don't do anything, I'd like to do something now, personally. It just can't sustain. Otherwise, this is what we're going to leave to our kids. I mean, we're already leaving them a problem. I heard a statistic that a child born today automatically starts off with $39,000 as their share of the debt. And I think an individual taxpayer's share is over over 50,000. It's just incredible. I think it's actually 150,000. But bottom line is it's terrible what we're doing and the legacy that we're leaving to our kids. Part of this is due to, like I said, our debt. We have a chart here. Again, this is in your book, and it shows the amount of debt that was accrued under each of the presidents. You can see towards the end, President George Bush was fighting the war on terror. In 8 years, he had $5.4 trillion that the debt, national debt was added to. If you look at President Obama, right now it's projected to be at 7.2, but the reason they say projected, because normally you put a ceiling on your debt. Well, just recently, a couple months ago, as a matter of fact, we didn't really raise our debt ceiling. We just kind of like popped the top off, because what we did is say, oh, it can go as high as it wants up until next year, and then we'll address it. So it's really actually even worse than putting in a ceiling. Before, we'd always say, okay, we'll increase the debt ceiling by $1 trillion. Well, no, this one just says whatever it is, it is. So we don't really have any spending caps on our deficit, on our spending limits. And that's a real shame, because in August of last year, during recess, Heritage Action did a 9-city tour. We called it the Defund Obamacare Tour. And we had Senator Ted Cruz help us kick it off in Dallas, and I think our third stop was over in Tampa. Did anybody make it over to Tampa last August? Probably, okay, probably not. Well, you guys need to get on my email list, and I'll keep you noted, keep you up to date when that happens again. We may be doing another one this August. So what we were trying to do there was to try and generate a support. We knew that the continuing resolution was going to be coming due in October, and we really were trying to generate, some buzz about let's just get rid of this Obamacare. Once and for all, it's going to start. People are going to start. The website's going to turn on August 1. There's all this problem going on, and the House did try and fight for a while. We had really big problems in the Senate. Y'all remember Senator Ted Cruz did his almost 24-hour, I think it was a 22-hour speech. That he kicked off. So I'm trying to generate that buzz. But in the Senate, when the continuing resolution came, it pretty much was dead on arrival. But even the Senate Republicans, McCain and Susan Collins and the woman from Alaska, pretty much killed it before it got got around to even being considered, along with Harry Reid. Harry Reid obviously was going to be a big roadblock. So, but the reason I bring that up here on this chart was what we were told then at the time is, look, let's don't worry about it. We're going to save our fight for the debt ceiling fight. But last January, when the debt ceiling fight did come around, or maybe it was the first week of February, we didn't get anything. We didn't. Usually, you'll negotiate. In fact, I think. Well, I have a clip. I'll have a clip of that. I'll get back to that. But anyhow, that's what we ended up with. We really essentially have no debt ceiling, and hopefully next January we will negotiate for something before we endeavor to raise it like that again. Here's another graph that shows our spending problem is really, really dire because one of the things that we need to do is reform our entitlement spending. So this basically shows Medicare, Social Security, Obamacare with Medicaid. This is 1970, okay, this is 2012, where we're at here at this line. Look what happens to our entitlement spending. It goes out the roof. In fact, remember that 18% that we normally do in revenues? There's that line again. Well, we hit a point in 2030 where just Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid and Obamacare eat up 100% of our revenues. Again, there's nothing for the military there. There's no room for anything else. So entitlement reform has to happen if we're to avert any huge financial issues. Okay, this was the, I'm wondering why this isn't showing. Okay, this was just a quick video of one of my not too famous House representatives named Nancy Pelosi. And she's asked when they're about that deficit debt ceiling fight earlier this year, she's asked, you know, normally under Reagan and Clinton and Bush and the other, other President Bush, normally the President of the United States will have to give up something in order to negotiate a debt ceiling. Why do you feel like this is any different? And she says, oh, our cupboards are so bare. We've just cut everything out of the budget that we possibly can. We can't get any more out of it. Fortunately, the video's not going to show. Well, guess what? We had $100,000 to build an outhouse on the Alaskan Trail. No plumbing. It was just an outhouse there. So certainly we did have something in that. We had $1 million to spend on art sculpture in the London Embassy. I don't know about you, but I think I could do that for a lot less, couldn't you? We also spent, I had a couple more here, $386,000. Oops. We spent $386,000 on a study to see if women calm down after an argument. Yeah, I think we could probably figure that one out. $182,000 to monitor depression on Twitter. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Let's see, I think I have another one here to show you. Get this out. Okay, this was during the government shutdown. What did President Obama do? But he erected barricades. How much money did that cost when the government shut down and you have all the non-essential employees, but he's going to either rent or find these barricades out of storage and pay people to go put them up. So it's just ridiculous. I mean, there is money out there to be cut. They just don't want to make the decision. Oh, and there was $5.4 million in the budget to buy crystal and booze for the State Department. And so Kerry can go around and wine and dine. And, oh, by the way, Hillary too. They're both guilty of doing it. $5.4 million for alcohol and new crystal. It's not like they didn't have crystal already, the gold, rim kind with the crest on it, but they had to get something. I think in the rec it said it had to be something on the scale of Neiman Marcus that would be sold in Neiman Marcus or something like this. Really? Come on. I mean, when we're having spending problems such as that, it's just incredible. But unfortunately, like our World War II heroes who stormed the beaches of Normandy, here they're storming the barricades of Barack Obama during the shutdown. There are people who are willing to do things and make sure that our government, and to secure our liberties. This graph here is a really interesting graph. One thing that the Congress did do in 2011 was they passed the Budget Control Act of 2011. And what that did is say, hey, look, we need to cut spending off the federal government. And it said, we're gonna make it so that if you don't cut spending and come to some agreements, we're gonna put in some automatic spending. Half was gonna be military, half was gonna be domestic discretionary spending. This is what it looks like. That little yellow band, and 2013, actually it started out even really thin right here. Well, we got halfway through 2013, and what did they negotiate away in the Ryan Murray budget? But they got rid of the only spending, this is the only cut that we've had in the last several years, and we gave that up. So really, seriously, we've got to, it's gonna hurt. We do have to make some reforms, and we may not get all the things that we want, but I mean, this is something, it's dire, and we feel that we really need to make some spending changes, because again, remember, you know, that is just not sustainable. I mean, this is what we averaged, and you can see we're well above that. So we have to do something soon, or we're not going to survive financially. This chart here shows you, well, okay, of all the spending, where is it going? This was just updated. Last year, this major entitlements, it says 49%. Last year was 45%. In fact, I think in your booklet, you'll see it says 45%, because this is actually was just updated within the last week. So you can see entitlements takes up half right now. Remember I said in 2030, this is going to grow to 100% of all our revenue. 20% income security, 18% national defense. Last year, I think it was 19%. And then another thing that is kind of unspoken is the interest on our debt. Right now, we're doing okay. Interest on the debt is low, but what happens when the interest rate rises? A lot of people don't think that we can sustain the low interest rate. For every interest rate, 1% rise in the interest rate, that's another $1 trillion that gets tacked onto our debt.
Is income security welfare? Is that what income security is?
I believe that's pensions.
For federal employees?
Yeah.
Pensions for federal employees?
Right.
Income security.
Yeah, I wish I had some. I know I'm not getting any of it. Okay, another thing that you hear a lot is, especially from the administration, oh, we're decreasing the deficits. Well, if you'll remember, they did, their very first year, they did almost $1 trillion in stimulus, and that made a huge deficit. So every year, as you're coming down from that, you would imagine it. But they're also saying, well, we're in a recovery. We got us out of the recovery. How many here know whether? Do y'all think that we're in a recession? If you think we're in a recession, raise your hand. Okay, you're right. We're not in a recession. In fact, the Washington Post did a poll in December, and 80% of those people don't feel bad, because and you were about 80% of the people feel like think that we're still in a recession. That's because our growth is so low. It's around 2%, or it's hovering somewhere around 2%. 2%, it feels like it's bad. But technically we're not in a recession. In other words, we haven't had stagnation for two quarters in a row. But how are we faring with this recovery, this quote-unquote recovery? This is compares the Reagan-style recovery to Obama-style recovery. Right now, this is the trajectory of number of jobs. If you look at the percentages after Reagan, if we had a Reagan-style recovery, we'd have 7 million more jobs than we do today. And this is important. If you remember Obamacare, CBO recently scored it and said that because of all the taxes in there, the negative effects of the economy, we are actually going to lose 2 million jobs in the next couple of years. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, if you've got, right now we have more people on food aid than have a private sector job. So like that donkey, carrying that cart all alone, we need more donkeys, not more sacks of, dead weight in the cart, pulling them down. Let's look at our growth gap. This is called the growth gap. again, comparing the Obama recession recovery with what it would be in Reagan, we would have $1.9 trillion more that we could use to maybe pay off that $17 trillion of debt if we had over the, these are the quarters, so this is about 4 years, maybe a little bit more than 4 years since technically we got out of the recession. So, you know, statistics don't look as good as they could be. You know, part of the problem is, what did Reagan do? He cut taxes, he cut regulations, he cut spending. What does Obama do? He's increasing taxes, increasing regulation, increasing spending. So really, we have some structural problems here. This chart here talks about the Obamacare taxes that started in 2013. These are all new. And you can see they go up as we go forward. The first year, this is 2013, last year, we got a new one kicking in, the employer mandates, things like that. A lot of these, you know, they've been trying to push back and to get past the 2014 election. Notice how they go down in the election year? How convenient. Then they go up, 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 up. So that was by design. Another chart here. Oh, this is wrong. That should be 71%. The top 10% pay 71%. You can see over here, this is from 1980, 85, 90, 95, 2005, 2010. That orange is the amount that the top 10% pay. It's now at 71%. I think I heard a little bit of Rush as I was driving by, and he said the top 1% pay 30% of the taxes. So, unfortunately, Obama, like I said, believes that we can still tax them more, and that's going to, that's how we're going to get out, that's how we can get away with not cutting our spending. Sorry, next video's not going to load for us either, unfortunately. But there is news. One of the good news, well, not really, because we still have Harry Reid in the Senate. But one of the stark differences in this administration from others is the fact that we don't pass a budget every year. The way we've been legislating and spending has been on continuing resolution. That means that we just say, oh, let's just use the spending levels as they are currently, and we'll go, you know, 3 more months, or 4 more months, or 6 more months. Usually it's whatever it is to get them over a hump, get them over an election, and whatever it is. The House has been good. They've been very diligent, and they passed a budget last week. They passed the Ryan budget. The gold here is the Obama budget that he put out. By the way, he only got 2 votes in the House on his. It went down in flames. What you'll notice here is in 10 years, that last year of the Ryan plan, you actually have a surplus. In other words, it gets rid of deficit spending in 10 years. Now, we actually key voted last week another budget that you made. Does anybody know what the Republican Study Committee is? Okay, I didn't know last year before I took on this job, but the Republican Study Committee is a very conservative wing in the House. And every year, they put forward what's called the Republican Study Committee budget. Guess what? It balances in 4 years. The other problem, though, is it does make some tough cuts, but, you know, I'm of the opinion that we cannot continue on that spending pattern anymore. So that's why we key voted that. We're also a fan of the Ryan budget because guess what? It does eventually balance in 10 years. The gold ones don't. He has no plan to address the debt. I mean, first you have to get the deficits under control before you can even tackle the debt, and he doesn't even do that. So anyhow, so we believe in some very basic tax reform. We believe that, number one, we need to lower taxes just like Reagan did. By lowering taxes, that keeps more money in your wallet, and you know, it'll be a much better multiplier in your pocket than by bureaucrats in DC trying to make those decisions. And I kind of joked about that form being simple to file. There are some, actually, believe it or not, there are some innovations coming from the IRS where they were actually looking at making it on the simple returns. Like I have kids that have employment, where it would, since they're already getting the income data from employers, where they could actually fill out the return and send it to the employed person or the taxpayer, and then they just review everything, sign it, and then it's a done deal, and it's not this big old process. But CPAs and Intuit, actually, the company that does TurboTax, guess what? They put a lot of money into lobbying effort, and I don't know that is ever going to see the light of day, but unfortunately, that's more often than not the problem is we've got this power structure now on K Street, the lobbying class that really have given rise to a new industry called crony capitalism, and so anyhow, those are some of the things that we need to work on. We believe that tax reform would be less coercive, and by that I mean there are a lot of credits in there that are more objectives that the president would like green energy credits. Several years ago, there was a big tax credit if you wanted to buy a golf cart, electric powered golf cart, and it was essentially free if you knew what you were doing. So they have coercive things in there. They have if you're a two-parent family and only one parent works, you can't put your child maybe in a half-day preschool and deduct it unless that second spouse works. I mean, so there's all kinds of problems, and if we get rid of, if you remember those 5 or 6 stacks of papers, I mean, we need to limit those so they're less coercive and much more simple. Also, the abuse of the IRS right now. You all know in the news that the 501c4 organizations that are conservative are being singled out and harassed by the administration. So tax reform, and unfortunately it's that same IRS that's now going to be in charge of our healthcare dollars and who gets subsidies and how we ration our care. And we also believe in maintaining rewards for saving and charity. So that's what tax reform should look like. One way to achieve that, we have a paper. Our website is Heritage Action. Our sister website, the Heritage Foundation, they're at heritage.org. You can go to heritage.org and type in whatever, any topic, any issue you're interested in. If you want to learn about taxes, we have a paper that is actually a flat tax. It's actually a new version on the flat tax where it's actually called the 1-2-3 plan, where it's one rate. You've got 2 credits. You get a credit for your payments to health insurance. That would also, assume that you'd be repealing Obamacare, and for earned income, and then 3 deductions for your home, for gifts to charity, or for higher education expenses. And what it does is it would tax it would tax on your consumption versus your income. So you would be able to deduct anything that you save from your paycheck would not be taxed. So what's left is what you spent, right? So the richer you are, the more you spend, the more taxes you would spend versus if you don't have a huge income, you're not going to pay that many taxes. So it would be simple, and it would basically do all those things I just outlined on the last screen. Also, the corporate tax rate is way too high. It's one of the highest in the world. I was going to say the country, but it's at 35% right now. If we, in fact, it was raised. I had a list of all the things that were raised. It was just raised with the fiscal cliff deal. In fact, there were 13 new taxes that came in with that fiscal cliff deal. I don't know if you remember that, but the deal that was struck then was to raise revenue through taxation. There were a lot of those types of things that were embedded in that deal. I mentioned before, tackling entitlement spending. It has to be done. We cannot sustain ourselves at those levels. One that you may not have heard of, I'm sure none of you have heard. Has anybody heard of the Transportation Empowerment Act? I didn't think so, because I've got a paper on that. That is something that is another form of taxation, except you don't pay it on April 15th. You actually pay it every time you go to the pump. When you buy gas, it's 18.4 cents of every gallon that you buy goes to the federal government up in DC. And it was started in 1956 to build out our highway system, our interstates. And they did an awesome job. They waited as they got the money in, then they did the jobs. Okay? It wasn't this creative financing where we're bonding initially. However, in the early 1980s, most of it was built out. So what do politicians do when they have this big influx of money coming in, but they find creative ways to spend? In fact, it was with our transportation fund where the first earmarks started coming through, and it became commonplace. I think in the 2005 reauthorization, there was between, I've heard 6,000, I've heard 8,000, I've heard 9,000 earmarks in that one bill. So it became basically a vote buying scheme by politicians. Another thing that they've done is they started diverting funds. 20% now go to fund mass transit. So in my county, in Hillsborough County where I live in 2010, our county wanted to get some of that money, that mass transit money, and in order to qualify, they had to come up with a local match. So they tried to raise our taxes by 1 cent. That's actually what really got me real involved into politics, was on this. And what they're trying to do is to get, if they build a big expensive mass transit system, they qualify for grants. So, wanting money to come in, that's a good way. Hey, we'll build a rail system, we'll get all this money in. I mean, we all know rail system don't work. I mean, we've seen Amtrak forever. In fact, after we won that battle, I'm actually now on the transit board in our county, and so I am up to date on a lot of the stuff. The average in the nation, fare box return, which means how much does the person riding it, how much of the fare do they pay and how much is subsidized, the average is about 22%. So that means the other 78% is taxpayer subsidies. It's ridiculous. I was just looking at, somebody asked me about there's a people mover in Jacksonville. For every trip, it costs $11.50. It costs the government, of which they pay 50 cents. So, I mean, these rail systems are okay. So the reason I bring that up, and I bring the Transportation Empowerment Act, is because what that does is it would devolve these federal funds over 5 years. We'd phase them out and return them back to the states. Let the states make those decisions. Because right now, the feds, through their policies, are finding, hey, we're going to fund this city's mass transit, and then they'll have requirements. Oh, by the way, another 20% is flexible funds. So really, the most you get out of road work back is 60%. So that other 20% is flexible. They can prescribe that you build sidewalks or streetlights, things that really aren't of national concern. Why is Washington, D.C. making these decisions? So we believe returning that back to the states. So what we're trying to do, and before I get to that, it's really going to come to a head shortly because in August, the Highway Trust Fund is going to be depleted. And I've actually heard now that it may be bumped up in June. So you may be hearing a lot of talk about raising, what is the solution out of DC? Raise your gas taxes, okay? Our solution is, let's devolve this gas tax. Let's get out of the federal government, working in transportation. Leave back maybe 3.5 cents for issues of national concern, because there are, I'm sure, a few. But let's let the states take over the interstate highway system. Let's let them, deal with transportation where they are closer to the people, where they can legislate a little bit better. So we would like to get momentum on this bill because we're going to be fighting a lot of, of those K Street lobbyists who like the system, who have gamed the system. And so if you could do one thing for me, that would be to call up or email Representative Webster and have him sign on as a co-sponsor, because if we get a lot of co-sponsors on this bill, that gives the bill momentum and help us in passing it. So that's something, that's one of your taxes that you don't see, one time a year. You pay it every time you go to the pump, and it's kind of a hidden tax. And then lastly, a big reform that we would like to see is repealing Obamacare, because like I said, remember the Supreme Court does believe that, or did rule that it is a tax, and so on tax day, it would be fitting to say let's repeal Obamacare, to repeal that tax. But that is the meat of my presentation. I would really encourage you, if you like the kind of information that you heard, I have a sign-up form on the table. It doesn't cost anything to sign up, but you'd be on my mailing list. Heritage Action is a great tool if you're interested in being active. We have a Monday night call with our political team at 5:30 every Monday to discuss with people around the country what's coming up, so that that we'll know. Actually, this week and next week they're on recess, But if they were in session, we'd be discussing what bills are going to be coming up for a vote, when we need people to make calls on a certain bill that we're trying to pass, and things like that. So it's a neat organization. If y'all are on the internet, you can check us out at heritageaction.com. And I really appreciate your time. I do have time to entertain any questions, if any. Yes?
Is Heritage Action only involved with national issues, or do you get involved with any state issues as well?
Good question. Yes, our infrastructure is in DC for the most part. We have a great GR staff, that GR meaning government relations, that will meet with members, like for instance on this Transportation Empowerment Act, they'll meet with staffers up there and try and get them to co-sponsor it. However, we don't have an infrastructure in Tallahassee, but there are issues that cross over. For instance, Medicaid expansion. We do have, it is of the federal issue, it is also a state issue. We also were very vocal in 2009, 2010 on an education bill called Race for the Top, which was a big block of money for the states that signed on. They also had to agree to the Common Core standards, and we've been very vocal against national standards. So those are two issues that I can think of that our researchers and our experts up in DC actually do a lot of research on both of those two issues. So there are from time to time those types of issues that come up. Yes, sir.
Did you have any problems getting credentialed in 2010 with the IRS?
Well, me personally, yes. I can't speak for our organization. If you saw anything that's been going on in the committee, you saw any of the testimony, you saw Cleta Mitchell, who is a lawyer. Actually, she was on the NRA board, and she was representing Catherine Engelbrecht of True the Vote, who she had well, both Catherine and Cleta had a pretty neat exchange with Elijah Cummings. But anyhow, she is our lawyer too for Heritage Action. Cleta is. Personally, I actually founded a 501c4 organization, and I actually put my application in. I sent it in February, the end of February of 2010. I got a notification that they received it March 8th of 2010, and it was the first week in the Inspector General's report. It was the first week when they started targeting organizations, and my organization had one of the names that they were be on the lookout for. So we did. I actually had to sign off under penalty of perjury, and since it was in the very beginning, we were asked 7 things. They wanted to know what our voter registration activities were. They wanted copies of all the educational materials. We had given seminars on the Constitution. They wanted all our education and things we planned to do, speakers we had, what we were planning to do in the future. I thought it was very invasive then, but it wasn't anything like, I think once they got emboldened, then they started asking for membership lists. Illegally, they were asking for donor lists. 501c4s don't have to produce the donor list. So, yeah, Heritage Action did not. I think they were able to get their C4. However, about 3 months ago, no, it was the day after Thanksgiving, the IRS came out with a proposed rule, a new rule for 501c4s. And that proposed rule was going to say, if you engage in voter registration, or if you engage in scorecarding, and I didn't bring my scorecards, but one of the things we do is we have a scorecard where we issue key votes on legislation, and kind of helps people know what is kind of puts issues on the radar. That would be considered political, and it would actually, if this rule went into play, it would affect our status, because that's a large part of what we do, is the scorecarding. So yeah, I think there is still abuse, there still is targeting, but they're trying to do it now. They're trying to actually embed in law what they were doing to singling out these individual organizations. They're trying to make it, and it was interesting because a 501c4, if you were to donate to a 501c4, you can't deduct that on your taxes. If you donate to a 501c3, like a church or a school, or even, a term charity, you could deduct it. Even they would, at this point, have more rights than a C4. They could do voter registration. They could do scores. Oh, and you couldn't do a candidate form. Candidate form would be illegal for a C4. So it was a very, they thought, but it was an attempt to embed into law. Now, there was such an outcry, we put out an action alert, you know, to save our organization to folks, and as did many other organizations. The IRS received back 150,000 comments, which is unheard of. And so they're starting to back away from it. But yeah, there is that inclination by the IRS to target their political enemies, so to speak, and single them out. I know many people who have been audited. I think Ben Carson was audited right after the prayer breakfast. And Catherine Engelbrecht withdrew the vote. She'll say that her small business that she owns in Texas, I think it's a manufacturing plant, they, all of a sudden, OSHA, the EPA, the IRS, the ATF, another one of those alphabet agencies came up and caused her problems after she started an organization that just wanted to make sure that, you know, that people that were voting were entitled to vote, you know, and the integrity of the vote. So, anybody else have questions? Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time that you've allowed me, and thank you so much.
Thank you.